Hello everyone, my name is Rochelle Innocent and I'm the founder and CEO of Project Purpose. Welcome to our channel. Our community is focused on fostering the intellectual and character development in children. We do this through our parent-child workshops that are focused on 4 themes: autonomy, self-efficacy, compassion, and self-concept, in order to cultivate grit, perseverance, and resilience in each child. And we are so thrilled to be offering one of the first of its kind digital, virtual, and continuous learning environments, enabling children and parents to connect from all around the world. At Project Purpose, our overarching mandate is to renew and rebuild family, community, and relationships. Our different social media platforms provide us with an opportunity to have discussions on all topics that relate to family, community, and relationships with ourselves as well as with others, with a primary focus on mental health and education. More precisely, the roles that the institutions of mental health and education have played and currently play in our lives today. Now, these discussions and debates provide us with an opportunity to think critically about what needs to change within these structures for us to live up to our bold slogan: support, protect, and empower each child through youth-focused development, better known as leadership in juvenescence. We recognize that in valuing our children's leadership potential, this also translates as recreating and co-creating environments, both socially and politically, that will enable our children to thrive. For those of you who are particularly keen on the topic, well, we write thought pieces every other Sunday. We actually just dropped a thought piece this past Sunday. So meander over to the website and check out our online content. If you're looking for listening alternatives, well, we're available on 10 different podcast platforms for your listening leisure, and we've offered the links in the description down below. Now, as is the convention, subscribe. Hit that post notification bell so that you are aware of every time we post. And of course, if you like these conversations and you want to keep them going, like, comment, and share this segment. Let's get into it. Allô, les meufs et les mecs. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I hope all of you are doing well, and welcome back to another episode here of Project Purpose. For those of you who are new, we cover topics that relate to mental health, mental wellness, and education on a week-by-week basis. And today our topic of discussion is on education. Now, this is going to be a critique of the current educational system in the way that it addresses both practical and philosophical applications of concepts and ideas that build into the fundamental structures of our societies. Now, this is a mouthful, but I promise I'm going to break it down, and I'm really just talking about the thought behind how we engage and how we work in specific spheres that lend to the socioeconomical landscape, that lend to the socio-political landscape. And this is a very macro level topic. I mean, it covers every aspect of society, whether you're talking about government, community, where you're talking about family, where you're talking about the individual contributor within society. There is so much thought behind the different structures and foundations that we leverage, that we navigate as part of our day-to-day lives as civilians, as citizens, and then now with digitalization, as even global citizens. There's so much thought put into place. But the issue with education is that unless you're going out of your way to seek out the philosophy, so the thinking that built into the foundations of these specific spheres, you're only really taught how to function within the sphere. So you're provided with the practical tools required to be effective, to be productive, and to continue the evolution and growth of that industry, of that sphere, respectively. Now, here's the caveat. The caveat is things as they are. There is oftentimes a demarcation from how they were meant to be, how they were thought out to be, the things that were taken into consideration, and it's hard for us to evaluate, to critique things as they are if we don't first have a really strong understanding of the baseline. And not just the baseline, because oftentimes when you're doing a fundamentals course, if you're doing a one-on-one course, they give you very light brush windmill explanations as to why this concept was put in place, as to why it was thought out, but they don't actually give you all the things that were taken into consideration, all the things that were explicitly out of scope, all of the risks and rewards that were thought up when a structure was established. And this is the information that you need to properly critique specific establishments, specific spheres, specific pillars that govern and dictate the way that we interact, relay with one another, with our government, and even with people who are outside of our country. So this is a big topic, but I'm going to make it a two-part series. I'm going to cover the areas that I feel are very pressing, especially currently, because I feel like these specific areas are the most problematic in North America. And you can let me know if you're watching from somewhere else, if other areas are the most problematic for you, in the fact that there is often a very stark difference between the philosophical aspect of why a structure was put in place and the practical application of it, and the issues that come out of someone being taught how to engage in a specific sphere, given the tools to work within a specific sphere, without necessarily given the philosophy behind why they do what they do and the actual overarching impact that that sphere has on society at large. So the first aspect that I want to cover in this conversation is politics. And I wanted to talk about politics because oftentimes we think about politics and we kind of put it in its own arena, but politics are everything to do with even just two people talking and engaging, and it has a lot to do with self-interest and collective interest. When we talk about self-interest expands from your own individual pursuits and the politics that are at play as you engage and interact with people that you may need on side or people who are against you in order to achieve these interests that you have. And then this grows and evolves as a collective body decides to engage and interact with different collective bodies in order to pursue their own interests. Now, I wish that politics wasn't really driven by self-interest, but that's just the best way to go about it. And we like to think that, self-interest layers into collective interest. Like self-interest doesn't need to be mutually exclusive from collective interest, and that's absolutely true. But we need to recognize that it's very problematic that people don't have a deep understanding of the philosophical roles that were established for our political spheres. It's also very problematic that we don't really have a sense of politics and how they were conceptualized until maybe post-secondary or graduate studies. And that's assuming you took the elective that best aligns with cultivating even a general understanding, or you decided to completely focus yourself in social political pursuits and having a social political degree, which, some people do, but I think that rather than it being a specialized area of focus, it needs to be a fundamental baseline for each of us, because each of us are involved in politics, whether we want to be or not. If we're part of a collective society, our lives are political. Our decisions are political decisions. Many of our conversations, even in adolescence, are political conversations. And the fact that we don't have an understanding of that, the fact that we don't understand the basis, the premise of politics just as they are, and politics as they've been conceptualized for the given nation, society that you're in, and how those politics interplay with, other countries' politics, and the fact that you can't think critically about the implications of choices being made is a huge flaw, a huge gap that our education system seems mysteriously uninterested in closing. And for me, I think that it's very, very important that when we think about practical application and philosophical conceptualization, politics is one of those areas where we need absolutely both. And we can learn just by being part of the system, just by being just by having an ear on the wall a little bit about the practical application. We can see how people are kind of governing themselves and operating within political spheres, and develop a general understanding of operations and how they, work things through and how they work things out. But I think that for us to be able to evaluate, to critique, and to assess the effectiveness of our politics, the correctedness of our politics, we first need to understand the philosophy behind why it was structured and built out the way it was. And it's also important to understand the philosophy of it, because with the philosophy, you have a deep understanding of all of the things considered. And when you think about all of the things considered, recognize that there were things that were considered out of scope. And we also need to realize that what was out of scope, what was considered in these tried and true, very traditional, very conventional structures are oftentimes things that we need to rethink with the growth and evolution of society. And it's very problematic that we carry traditions, we carry conventions, especially within political spheres, that were founded hundreds of years ago when who we are, how we identify as a nation, regardless of what nation that you might be, has radically changed within 100 years. So it's important that we have thinkers, we have people who recognize the philosophy behind politics and political spheres and governance and policy, rethink, rehash the baseline, the fundamental conceptualizations, and have that translate into practical application. But we can't hold people accountable to do that work, to do that feedback loop when we don't understand the philosophical implications that were preconceived when we built out these political structures. And I think that this is a huge gap. It disenfranchises people in a way where even if you think that what you're saying is supporting or is a holistic critique of the political system, like you see the areas where improvement is required, you're working off of a lot of missing information. And unless we have a philosophical understanding, like social political philosophy as a fundamental that is taught from a very young age, it can really be simplified in a way where, even someone in primary school, you can parcel it out so that you're always having a theme or an aspect of your education touching on social political philosophy, and then building up into practical application, and then being able to demarcate and to outline the gap between, well, how was our political landscape conceptualized and how far removed are we from that conceptualization? What was initially considered? What do we recognize needs to be considered now? What was the original premise? Who was the original premise supposed to support? Who are the interested parties? Who are the interested parties now? Who in application are we recognizing as being supported now? How are we holding political spheres accountable? And if we're not holding them accountable, how can we build processes? How can we build governance so that we can have a more hands-on approach in the way that we govern our government, right? Because our government is for us, it's built by us, for us, to enable us to, pursue living, growing meaning beyond just basic survival. But if it becomes its own beast, and it will become its own beast if we're not holding it accountable to the baseline, and the baseline is really established from the philosophical conceptualizations of the different political structures that are at play currently. If we're not able to critique from that baseline, if we're just critiquing from what we're seeing, then we're at a disadvantage, right? We're at a disadvantage and we're working blindly. And I think one of the issues that I have truly about people who have a practical understanding of politics and of policy and of governance is they're taught how to operate. They're taught how to be players. They're not necessarily taught how it was supposed to have been, to then properly assess the disparity between how it was meant to function and how it's currently functioning, to then decide, well, how much of this do I need to calibrate? Like, how much do we need to build a bridge, or, maybe burn the bridge altogether? But if you don't have that baseline, you can't do either of those things. So I think my initial critique when it comes to, philosophical conceptualization and then practical application by way of education is a lot of our education is focused on practical application. So focus on teaching us how to be operators, how to just do the work that is in front of us and do that work really well without actually thinking about why this work is being done, the implications of this work being done, the conceptualization of why this work was even something that we thought was of value to begin with, that there's so much critical aspects of why that work is in front of us that we just have no sense on. It's a big blind spot. And I don't think that it should be. I think if we all want to be contributing, informed members of society, then we all need to recognize the areas that we need to be informed on, the areas that we need to be educated on in order to enable ourselves to think critically about the different structures that are making decisions that are impacting all of our lives, especially as the landscape becomes much more political. It's much more, the politics are becoming much more complex with different parts of world politics now really being in our back door, right? And a lot of the times world politics, there is a filtering mechanism. We only learned as much as our government wanted us to learn, but with different social platforms, a lot of world politics and the decisions that our countries are making in the global arena, they're in our back door. And we have the fear, we have the apprehension, but we don't have the understanding of how to engage as citizens, how to contribute as citizens, how to ensure that our voices and our opinions and our perspectives are also taken into consideration with the choices that our government, a representation of our views, our ideals, is acting and operating within these global spheres. And not just global, it's something that's important even for what happens within the borders of our own country. But it's a point of contention that I have, because I think that, reading, writing, and arithmetic are important, but having a sense of how to operate within a collective society, being given the philosophical considerations for why our political spheres are built the way they are, to then build a bridge between practical application for those who want to be operators within that sphere is super crucial. Because I think even for those of us who don't want to be in politics, who don't want to be operators within the political sphere, need to be philosophers. We need to understand the true nature of our own politics. We need to understand the history of our politics. We need to understand the considerations, the objectives, the targets, what was considered, what was taken into consideration when those things were built, and then how far removed are we as a collective identity from who we used to be, and then how do we grow, evolve, reshape our philosophical conceptualizations of our internal national politics so that these new conceptualizations are taken into consideration in application. So, I hope that made sense. I hope you recognize what it is that I'm really trying to say, because I think that it's important that we all recognize that to think critically, you need to have all the appropriate fundamentals. You can't just have partial information and expect that your critical thinking is going to be very effective. You need to recognize what it is that you need to give yourself a solid start as you start to really critique and assess what's happening in front of you and the decisions that are being made on behalf of you and how you're going to engage and navigate the environment around you. In any case, that was our first topic here on education, really just recognizing the importance of having philosophical considerations by way of politics in our society and having that be educated at a very young age, as opposed to just having practical knowledge of politics just based on how we kind of just watch and see and based on the news and what they're showing. And even then, we don't know how big the blind spots are, but I think we all need to recognize our blind spot when it comes to the philosophical considerations of our politics, the fundamentals that were built into our political structures, and recognizing that not having that means we don't know how far removed the decisions that are being made today are from, what was taken into consideration in the past when these structures were built, and what should no longer be taken into consideration in the past, given that our identity has grown and evolved, and what should now be taken into consideration given that our identity has grown and evolved. So that was it for this first video. It's food for thought for you. And honestly, when it comes to social political philosophy and even the different aspects of politics that interplay within our societies, that this is a great opportunity for us to take on ownership of educating at home. And even for us, if we don't have a philosophical understanding of our own politics, if we don't have a deep understanding of the considerations that were built into the political structures that are making decisions on our behalf right now, we can self-educate. This is an opportunity, this is a call to action to self-educate, because as the global arena becomes more complex, as we are required to respond more rapidly, as we are required to just be more engaged in a larger global sphere, we need to be more informed. We need to all have the appropriate baseline to think critically, to make strong, solid decisions, and to feel as though we're making decisions with all of the appropriate information that we need. And that doesn't mean all information, absolutely, but it means at least the fundamentals. We are at least operating within the political sphere with an understanding that our decisions are being driven by the considerations that we feel best align, best represent our collective identity. So all of that to say, that's the end of our conversation for now. And I think this conversation needs to build, but I want to touch on it. I want to kind of bring it to your attention. Now, I would like to let you know, I would be remiss if I didn't let you know that we are now going to be going live at least twice twice a month, every month on our Facebook page. We're very excited about that. We have a full calendar built out for the full year. Now, these events are paid events, all to say we are providing the critical thinking, the soft skills required to derive more meaning and fulfillment out of life. And we're very excited to engage with you in this way. We're excited about the growth and evolution of Project Purpose and the opportunity to support adults in their journey towards creating purpose and fulfillment in their own lives. Now, if you do see yourself engaging with our community on an ongoing basis, then I suggest that you purchase one of our package plans, which gives you unlimited access to our live events, and over and above that, access to webinars and workshops that we plan on building over and above these live events. So all of that to say, I've provided you with some teasers as to where to find this specific information. All of it is available on our website. Definitely check out our Facebook page, follow us on all of our social media channels, and we look forward to talking to you soon.